Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Authors on the Air. I'm your host, James Latwell, and with us today we have Jon Lindstrom. How are you doing, Jon?
I'm doing great. It's so good to see you, James.
Good to see you. Now, John's got actually a paperback release that's coming out, I think, on the 19th for Hollywood Hustle.
Yep,
Yeah,
right there. Actual paper.
actual paper
Yeah.
in real life.
Yeah,
Now,
I was a big fan of paperbacks when I was growing up. So this
I
is
was
this is
too.
another dream come true.
Yeah, I was too, and it's always kind of fun. You never get over that euphoria of seeing it, in real life. It's like it's really here.
Yeah, for sure. And first time for everything. I don't think anything will ever compare to the hardcover coming out and now the paperback coming out. All I can hear is that Beatles song in my head all the
Paperback
time.
writer.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Now, Jon, I mean, you came on the crime fiction scene, the Hollywood Hustle. You're a USA Today best-selling author. So, I mean, you took kind of an unusual journey to get to this, and I hope we'll talk about that in a bit. But for folks that haven't picked up Hollywood Hustle yet, the paperback's coming out, so that now's your opportunity. But could you give them a little tease of what Hollywood Hustle's about?
Yeah, my main character is a film actor named Winston Greene. Of course, I've spent a long time in Hollywood, so write what you know. And I've known a lot of guys who have done very well and then crashed and burned. And Winston Greene is no different. He's gone very high, he's gone very low, and now he's crawled his way back to where his life and career is sober and stable. And of course, that's when things go wrong. So this gang of murderous misfits really show up and announce that they've kidnapped his daughter because they want to get all of his movie money. And what they don't know is, one, he spent his movie money a long time ago, and two, nobody makes the kind of movie money they used to make. So he's got to figure out a way to get his daughter back alive, who he has been estranged from for a while. She's a very troubled person herself. And at the same time, having to take care of his 6-year-old granddaughter, the daughter of his estranged daughter, which he didn't expect to have to do, but who gets to plan anything? And so he enlists a couple of his friends from his life, one of them being a stuntman, his best friend, a stuntman named Grover Washington. No, not related to the musician or named after him. And his friend Teddy, who is a disgraced former police detective who's now working as a private detective.
That's great. Now, Winston kind of sees his film career mostly in the rear view now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's a really unusual character as a main character in this kind of a story, and I really like it. How did you come to create Winston as the character for this book? I mean, it's not autobiographical.
No, fortunately it's not. Fortunately and unfortunately, I would have loved to have my acting career go as high as Winston's had, but I would never want to go crashing the way he did. But it's not hard to find examples, and many of whom I've known a lot of these guys. But I can say it now, there is inspiration in the career and life arcs of those we've heard of, most recently probably Tom Sizemore. He was an absolutely gifted actor and was working with all the great directors, the Spielbergs and Michael Manns and everyone. And he was never really able to get a handle on his demons. I don't mention him in the book because he was alive when I wrote it. I do mention a guy that I used to run into out in Malibu by the name of Jan Michael Vincent, who really had a terrible ending that shouldn't have happened. And he was another one who was just one of those incredibly gifted guys who just seemed to know how to do what's required to be a film star.
Yeah.
And that's a different thing. I mean, there are actors, and then there's a very small group of people who are stars. And the people who can really last in that bright light have an innate gift to be able to deal with it. And unfortunately, Winston was not able to do that.
Yeah. No, I think that's kind of what makes him so relatable is he's got a lot of flaws, and he's tried to work his demons and make friends with as many of his demons as he can. But it in many ways, this is Hollywood Hustle is kind of a redemption story for Winston, isn't it?
Mhm. It is, yeah. As we know, when you kind of lose your rudder to that kind of destructive behavior, you leave a lot of damage in your wake.
Yeah.
And that means, family, friends, loved ones. You make a lot of bad choices. And the people who get hurt are the ones that are closest to you. So um, his redemptive story is kind of metaphorical in how he has to find a way to rescue his daughter from mistakes that she's made, as we discover in the course of the story, but really as a way for him to find his way back to himself and that that secret place inside of him that made him a hero of cinema for a while,
Right.
is something that that you really you wouldn't believe, but it wouldn't surprise me if someone like Tom Hanks were actually a heroic guy if you found yourself in a foxhole next to him, because I think there's something inside of him that he may not even be able to articulate. But I hope that answers your question. I mean,
It does.
okay.
Yeah, it does because he's very relatable, and you see there's this inner strength. He's got a moral compass and that kind of wavers a little bit, but he's on the path, and he's kind of
Yeah, he
making his
wants
way
to do the
back.
right thing.
Yeah,
Absolutely. He has learned already by this time that I have to do things the right way in order to get to the right result. But there was also something I really wanted to kind of pull back the curtain on with this particular story.
yeah,
Was that not everybody in Hollywood is just made of money. Not everybody is a limousine liberal. Not everybody has an easy road. In fact, it's a hard road, and it's a tough, uh, fraught career. And
yeah,
Los Angeles can often be a very, very dangerous place, despite all the sunlight and bright colors around you that make it feel like it's very warm and welcoming. There's an undercurrent here
yeah.
that is truly a threat to anyone who wants to, especially those who are looking to reach those heights or are drawn by that bright light of fame and fortune.
Yeah, and it's that undercurrent that I'd like to kind of talk about for a little bit because you kind of peel back the curtain a little bit on what goes on in that environment in Hollywood that people on the outside just don't get and appreciate. And through all the glitz and glamour that they see, there's this other world over there. And how much pushback or reactions from people in the industry did you get when you put this book out?
Actually, I haven't gotten any.
Really?
If
Wow.
anything, I've gotten a lot of thanks. In fact, that's been one of the most gratifying things to me in this entire journey of gratifying events, that the people that have reached out to me in my industry to say, thank you for writing a book that actually talks about how we live in this place called the business of show, that we
Yeah.
have lives, that we have children, that we have challenges. And what we see, usually Hollywood is portrayed in a way that's kind of wrapped in a fairy tale. Even A Star is Born, and I would point out Bradley Cooper's terrific version of that. It still ends with her becoming this great star and
Yeah.
living this life of what we would normally call a fantasy, even though he goes out of his way to show you the downside as well. But there's this kind of light at the end of the tunnel that is sort of heavenly. And I didn't want to do that. That's not the end that most of us experience. Most of us end up retiring in a place less expensive and getting tired of the constant hamster wheel that showbiz requires.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to reinvent myself virtually every week in order to
Mm.
just to stay in the game. Um, And that really does take a toll. So to answer your question, no, there hasn't been any pushback. I have had some readers, and I'm not sure they actually read it, but I'll see online people trying to tell me that I'm misrepresenting Hollywood because they know from social media that that's not how people live. Well, you know what? Social media is as artificial and produced as any episode of CSI, or
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
the Real House whatevers of wherever. I mean, it's just, it's showbiz is showbiz. It's to give you a
Right.
show to make money from. And that's what we see. Even, that's why even on my my social media now, I do a little bit of editing, but if I sit there and I talk to my phone, I
Yeah.
try to keep it as grounded as possible. So it doesn't look like fancy lighting and great effects going on. It's all pretty much stuff I can just do in my phone.
Wow. Yeah, it's a different world. And you know, you've had a very successful career, on that side of the world with, I think 4 Emmy nominations, and
Mhm.
you've been, actor, director, producer. What made you step to the dark side and become a crime fiction author?
What made me step into your dive into your end of the pool, in other words?
Yeah.
I always wanted to do it. I had
Hmm.
always written. I recently was going through my storage unit and I found some peachy folders. Remember those?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and with the athlete on the front or something. And I
Hmm.
found this is how poor I was. I had a peachy folder in college. All right. But I was taking some creative writing class at the University of Oregon, and I found my first attempt at a short story in there. And of course, it was about a serial killer stalking a student on campus. Um, so I've always had that desire to write, and I've actually always kind of loved the solitude of writing. Later on, when I came into working in film and television, you can't help it, but you get interested in how is this done,
Yeah.
and having an interest in writing and story and structure and composition and genre and all that stuff. Like everybody else and their dog, I started writing screenplays, and I got a couple of those made. Directed a feature from one of them, and I've had an awful lot of development meetings along the way, and a lot of options that didn't pan out. So I learned a lot. I just learned a lot, but I also realized that sitting down to write a book, I think I just got to a point where I was tired of having collective decisions made on
Mhm.
something that I really just wanted to follow on my own. So, I mean, it is a lonely profession sometimes, but I'm not alone when I'm doing this because you got all these voices going in your head. Everybody's keeping you company when you do it, but none of them are telling you what to do.
Mm.
They're just kind of guiding you along.
Yeah.
And that I guess that was really what it was. I was sick and tired of just being told how to write it or how to change it, or else I just wanted to
Or
write the book the way I wanted to write it.
yeah. Well, that's great. I appreciate that very much because yeah, it's a solitary business, but you've got all these characters and voices and things in your head that they're just dying to come out.
Yeah, yeah.
Now writing screenplays feels like a much different muscle memory than writing long form fiction. What was your biggest challenge in making that adjustment?
Well, I came across a quote, and I believe, and honestly, I can't remember exactly who it was, but I do believe it was Joan Didion, who was one of my
Mm.
favorites. I mean, her writing kind of changed my life way back when I was 21 years old, when I read the White Album, and in an afternoon, couldn't put it down. But she said, and she and her husband John Gregory Dunn, they made a lot of money and had a lot of success writing screenplays. And she said, somebody asked her the question in reverse, what's how do you adjust to that? And she just said, in her little way with her cigarettes, said,
Yeah.
a screenplay is basic, and I'm paraphrasing, a screenplay is basically a big ass outline for a book. And if you think of it that way, I realized that when I wrote screenplays, I'm not one to outline. I just kind of like to follow the story and let the story lead me, as it were. And so the difference really was just technical. Writing a screenplay, you have to learn all these technical things of, 3-act versus 6-act and interior, exterior, show it, don't say it, all that stuff that has to happen. But once you kind of get that formula down, I think it's I think it's much easier. Now, Waldo Salt, who wrote, I think he wrote Spartacus. He was considered one of the great screenwriters. He felt that screenwriting was as much a skill and talent as writing prose. I'm not sure I agree with that. Maybe he was making a lot of money to do it, and that's why he said it. But I don't know. It was actually liberating after spending years writing screenplays where you try to confine it to something.
Yeah.
To suddenly just kind of, even just describing a room, you can just describe away. I felt like it was just a more fun, freer, lighter way to write, honestly. So it wasn't like an adjustment. It was more like a liberation, if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Now, when you made the jump and you became part of our tribe as a crime fiction author, what were some of the biggest surprises to you when you kind of entered into this community?
Well, I'll tell you, the biggest one was a confirmation of what somebody had once said to me. A very good friend of mine, a television writer, named Lynn Marie Latham, very good friend of mine, and she's now retired, but she had created several television shows along the way, and she was always the one who would say, "Jon, I'm telling you, writers are the most helpful of all the creative fields." And having spent my career as a writer, I'd go, "Yeah, right." Yeah, they smile while they're, angling the knife towards your spine, But I've told her many times since then, you've never been more right about anything. This community, and of course, I'm not trying to win the National Book Award. I don't know what that literary society is like yet, but I can tell you that the crime community, the thriller writers, the mystery and crime fiction writers, I've never met a more welcoming group. And I liken it to somebody who's made a feature film, especially independently. Talk about pushing a boulder uphill by yourself. But writing a book is the same thing in a way. And I think there's a lot of the camaraderie comes from, you went through the fire, you crossed the Rubicon, you did it. Welcome. We know what you've been through. So that was a big surprise because I didn't believe that necessarily. I was happy to be wrong. Another one is how truly supportive the business angle of our field is, of our industry. Publishers, and I know we have good for you recently interviewed the just brilliant Will Viharo, who chooses to self-publish, and I see no shame whatsoever, right?
No.
But I wanted to go through kind of mainstream publishing because I didn't want to design covers and I didn't want to deal with distributors and marketers and all that stuff. I've done that in film, and it's a nightmare. But what I found from publishers only seem to be interested in just getting the best book, the best story, the best example of what somebody is going to pick up and read. I mean, the work they put into this cover And I think it's a great cover. I mean, when I
Yeah,
walked
it
in
really is. Yeah.
and saw that, I went, "Oh my God, my eye goes right to that." Just that, their love and passion of getting good story out there. No one ever told me what to write. I had some suggestions, and they were usually correct, because they have been doing it a lot longer than I have.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've just found the love and the support that we all share for the written word extends to every single person in the business. My agent, Liza Fleisig,
Yeah.
our collective publisher, Crooked Lane. I mean, everybody has just been terrific to me and been nothing but supportive and enthusiastic and want to see us, people like you and me, succeed.
Yeah, I mean, I can't second that enough. I mean, I came out of prison literally and jumped into this. And you talk about a stab you in the back, environment. I expected that same thing here, and like you, totally blown away by how supportive everyone is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an amazing, amazing place.
Wow, it's funny. My second book is much about a guy, as you know. I asked you some questions, but it's about a guy who gets out of prison and comes back to Los Angeles after having, a very short-lived career in Hollywood. And
Right.
I can't help but see all the similarities between Hollywood and the work that you did. That prison mentality that takes a hold and never lets go.
It does. It kind of gets ingrained there. Now, you just mentioned that book. Do you have a release date for that yet?
No, I don't, but it is due February of 2025. So
cool.
Finally,
do you have is there a title that we can tell folks, or
right now it's either Hollywood Purgatory or Purgatory Hollywood?
Oh, okay.
But purgatory is the operative word.
Yeah. That's great. I love it.
I'm trying to, I have these 3 books that I want to do. I do resist calling them a trilogy because it's not really a trilogy, but they are a troika of books about Hollywood. I would love to see them all start with the word Hollywood. So that's why I'm considering Hollywood Purgatory. The third one, I have no idea what that's going to be called. All I know is that it'll be kind of like you will know him by the trail of dead kind of a story.
I love it. So let's end up with something we call 3 quick hits. I want to put you in Winston's headspace, and just 3 quick questions on how Winston would answer these.
It's like an acting exercise. Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Something you might have accomplished, somewhere along the line. What's Winston's favorite cocktail or his drink of choice?
Club soda. He doesn't drink anymore.
That's right.
But when he did, it was Maker's Mark bourbon.
Gotcha. How about his favorite music? What does Winston listen to?
Jazz.
Perfect.
Yeah, and I mean, like, the classic, Charlie Bird Parker and Thelonious, that kind of stuff. He likes that.
Okay, good deal. And finally, what's Winston's greatest fear?
Getting it wrong. Failure at something that he's supposed to be good at. That's his biggest fear.
Gotcha. That's perfect sense.
Now, I have to ask you a question.
Yeah.
You have a book coming out in January, if I'm not mistaken.
I do, yeah. It's River of Lies, the sequel to Face of Greed. Again, set inside.
Man, your titles are great.
Yeah, I do like this one. And I don't have the cover to show you for River of Lies, but I mean, Ocean View just knocked it out of the park with this one. It's
great.
Love it.
Great.
So,
well,
but thank
really
you for that.
Looking forward to it. I think you're one of the best writers on the scene, and I'm really.
Oh, thanks, John.
Really
that means a lot. Thank you. I appreciate that. Folks, we've been talking with Jon Lindstrom. John's the author of Hollywood Hustle. The paperback is coming out right now. So as Christmas shopping is winding up, now's your chance to get on that bandwagon and do something about it. Jon, it's been a blast to talk to you.
Been great talking to you, Jim. Hope to see you soon.
You betcha. Take care.